there was no. What was your childhood home like? Were the books there? Did your parents read? Was it a part of the natural environment?
I give a lot of credit to my mom. She's a big reader, and I think like a lot of moms, probably worldwide, like she really was paying attention to when I became bored at a certain level. You know, like kids will reach a level where they're tired of reading a kid's book and they need a step up intellectually. Yeah. And she was right there. And she'd go to the library with me and talk to the librarians and look for suggestions and then plug me into those books. So a lot of it was about having a good public library, great public schools, a good school libraries. I don't remember our house being like full of novels or adult books, but I remember that my access to books and reading was pretty much unlimited.
I remember going to the library and carrying tons of books.
Yeah, you come out with like a stack of books. Which is
These are not read. These are read.
Right. So.
You quote Herman Melville. As an introduction. Was he one of the writers that made you want to write?
No.
No.
In fact. I hated Moby Dick my whole life until I got to Iowa. And then at the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, it's not like any other school in the world. You don't get a grade. You don't have to take tests. You don't even have to show up to class. If you just want to get drunk every day, that's fine. You'll get your degree after 2 years. You will have squandered your time, but you can do it. I told you already, I took a different tact. I went all in. And one of my all-time favorite writers is a guy named James Galvin. He wrote a book in the early 90s, late 80s called The Meadow, which is like one of the best examples of prose poetry, prose fiction I've ever read. It's beautiful. And so he offered a one-semester class on Moby Dick. We didn't have to read 10 books, we didn't have to read 15 books, we didn't have to read all we had to read was Moby Dick. That's it.
Which is quite a task.
It's a task. But I figured, man, if I can't read Moby Dick with like one of my literary heroes holding my hand for a semester, all you have to read is 3 to 4 chapters a week, like I don't deserve to be a writer. And I got so much out of it. And it's about male friendship, it's about adventure, the natural world, violence, and so I was reading it very closely and I would take notes and write down these quotes, and I got to that sentence and just thought, that's it, you know, that's what I wanted to do.
Well, that's good to set a standard for yourself.
Well, it's that Herman no.
It is a great book, but you know, it's a very weird book as well.
It's a really weird book. Yeah, it breaks every rule. If there can be rules for fiction, it's a very bizarre book.
Did you set up any rules for yourself when you wrote this book? You make some very interesting choices structurally. You choose all the main characters have a voice as a narrator, and you sort of juggle around with their parts in the story. And then you use, as we just touched upon, the weddings of all the main male characters as a sort of dramatic turning points in the story. Was that stuff you structured for yourself before you set out, or was that a way of writing that sort of came from the writing?
It totally came from the writing. I don't, a writing teacher will give you all these rules, but that's bogus. The only rule in writing is don't write bad. You know, as long as you can pull it off, you can do whatever you want. Which is why Moby Dick is so good, which is why sometimes A Great Notion is so good. Let's see here. Let me take this apart. The first chapter was written in Henry's voice. I wrote it in one sitting at Iowa. I sat down one night at like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I was really homesick and lonely. I was probably listening to Bon Iver. During my time in Iowa, Regina and our son Henry were living in Minnesota, so every Monday I would commute down to Iowa, which is a 4.5-hour drive, and then I would get to this apartment that I was renting, and inside the apartment I had this room, and there was like one half of my brother-in-law's childhood bunk bed. It was very red. It was like as red as your backpack. Like the kind of bed like a 9-year-old kid would sleep in. And then I had a white desk and a black folding chair. So I would get off the road and come into this apartment, and I didn't talk to my landlady at all because she kind of creeped me out. And she had a cat, and I'm allergic to cats. So I would get away from the cat, just get into this room, close the door, and immediately feel totally depressed. And so that's a great place to write from, truly. And I was sitting in there at the desk one night thinking about how sad I was and thinking about Wisconsin and thinking about the recent summers that Regina and I had had, which was basically just going to wedding after wedding after wedding. And this first chapter just came out of me. And I remember like looking up from the computer at 2 o'clock in the morning and not knowing where time had gone. And I turned it in, and my friends looked at it, and they really liked it. They really liked Ronnie. They could really see his body. Yeah. You know, they knew what he looked like.
The rodeo guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm really, I don't know what the word is. I don't take compliments very well. So they were saying all these nice things, and of course I thought that meant they hated it. So I didn't like work on it anymore until the spring when I wrote this long chapter, which was sort of about stolen pickled eggs. And then I thought, oh, well, like maybe these should be together. And that's when I started to figure out what the narrative structure was, that I had to give each of these people a separate voice.
The stolen pickled eggs is a great part of the novel.
Oh, thanks.
Is that pure fiction? Is there a secret story behind that?
No, that's one of the few moments in the book that is like close to pure fact. Yeah. And it's really fascinating because, you know, I'll talk to people about that book, and I know that a certain percentage of readers hate that scene. Yeah. They're just like, well, this was a really good literary book, and then we got this crazy pickled egg scene, and you lost me. And other readers really love it. But what happened was when Regina and I were living in Minnesota, her brother came to live with us, and he would help take care of our son because my wife's an attorney. I was gone all the time. So one Thursday, I get off the road from Iowa, and Regina's putting her son to bed. And I go into the kitchen. My brother-in-law is sitting there at the table, and he's having a beer. So I open a beer too, and he said, I got this crazy story to tell you. And he had been working at a bank in downtown Minneapolis with a lot of like other sort of young people. And there was this one young woman that he would go out with, and she had the worst taste in men ever. She just dated the worst dudes.
Some have that talent.
Yeah. And he said, I just heard this crazy story I have to tell you. So this girl had dated this guy in rural Minnesota. He lived in some small town. I don't know where it was. And he was like, as I said, he was a bad guy. One day he's sitting at a bar in the afternoon, and he looks across the bar and he sees this giant jar of pickles. And he thinks to himself, I'm going to steal the pickles. I don't know why.
He was probably a little pickle.
He was drunk, right? Yeah. So the afternoon progresses, and he's trying to find a way to steal the pickles, and he does. He like somehow gets behind the bar, takes this giant jar of pickles, and goes out on Main Street. And by now it's early evening, and he's taking pickles out of the jar and throwing them at oncoming traffic. Just like throwing a pickle, hits the windshield. Apparently the car keeps driving. Well, he takes a pickle this one time, and he throws it at an oncoming car, hits the windshield, guy slams on the brakes, and gets out of the car. And of course, because this is an American story, the guy's got a gun. You don't have to explain that part in America, but here we are. The guy pulls a pistol and shoots the pickle thrower in the leg, and then drives off. But the problem is, the pickle thrower stole the pickles, he's drunk, And he was a bad guy. Like, who knows, he may have had criminal charges in the past. So he doesn't go to the hospital like a normal person or call the police. He's just like, I'm going to go home and see how this thing goes. And he does, and like 3 days later, it's healed up. And I should say, at the time of the shooting, he's a heavier guy. He's carrying some extra pounds. Well, over the course of the next year, he takes up jogging. He's still dating this girl who's telling the story. He picks up jogging, and now he's losing all kinds of weight. And almost a full calendar year goes by, and what's happening is the bullet slug in his leg is, the fat around it is beginning to melt off, and the slug is getting itchy inside his leg. So he calls up the girl that my brother-in-law is working with, like on a 3-day holiday weekend, we'll say 4th of July or something like that. He said, hey, you should come over to my house, I got a project for you. And so they're drinking and having a barbecue or whatever, and at some point towards the end of the evening, he says, we got to take this thing out of my leg. And so he drops a scalpel and a pliers into some boiling water, and she cuts open his leg, and she gets the pliers, and she can find the slug in his leg, and she's got her like foot on him, and she's pulling like this, but there's so much scar tissue built up around the slug that they can't get it out, and now he's bleeding profusely all over the place. And she says, we should probably go to the hospital. And so they go to the hospital, they go to the emergency room, and he says, I've been shot. And they said, no, you haven't. This is like a small town. We would know if you'd been shot. We have the police scanner, and he's like, I've been shot. Take an x-ray. So they take an x-ray. Sure enough, there's the bullet slug. They pull it out. Then like a couple weeks later, the girl and the guy break up, and there's my brother-in-law telling me the story in the kitchen, and I'm like, holy shit, that's the craziest story I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know if it's high literature or low literature, but I don't really care. I'm just going to write it down so it doesn't get lost. And then it was weird. It became this way for Henry and Lee to sort of reconcile this thing that had happened. And the other sort of unlikely thing that had happened was at the same time Paul Newman had died. And he meant a lot to me as an artist and as an actor. I just think he's the best. And so I was thinking about Cool Hand Luke and the egg eating scene. And so I changed it from pickles to pickled egg.
Male friendship. What are your thoughts on it in the book, and what are your own friend love like? Friend?
Well, friendship's a kind of love, so well, it's a first novel, so I wasn't thinking about anyone. I wasn't thinking about the critics. I wasn't thinking about publishing. I was just thinking about writing from my own personal experience. And I've really been blessed in my own life to have great male friendships. And I think that's pretty much what I was reporting on. You know, like right now in America, there's kind of this stupid kind of, I think modern's a good way to put it, term like bro.
The bromance.
I think that's really destructive and dumb. You think about a movie like The Shawshank Redemption or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, like boiling those stories down to a bromance is terrible. So I'm just trying to write about like love amongst people.
You're also writing about friendship as something that changes with age. It's sort of like it's got a, you know, like when boys become friends, they're like, okay, we're friends, and then they just continue to be friends. But whereas girls, they sort of, well, we're friends, but we could maybe change this and change that, and when you do this, I do that. You know, it's a much more social kind of process. But this story describes male friendship as being in two terms, sort of. That it begins like the thing that just continues, and then it gets difficult. With the more mature years, because well, why?
Well, Yeah, I wasn't, there again, I wasn't necessarily trying to make a distinction between male friendship and female friendship because I'm not a female.
No.
And I think it's universally pretty much the same. People want to be with people that they like. But what I was seeing was that, at least in our group of friends, at least where we live, there comes a point kind of in our late 20s, early 30s anyway, where some people have found economic success, some people haven't. Some people are going through their first divorce. Other people's marriages look very easy and natural. It's also the age, at least in America, where some people are trying to have children and it's really easy for them. And then you meet couples where it's really hard and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And when you're a close-knit group of friends, you're making those sort of comparisons. Why is it so? Why do they have a beautiful new house and we don't?
Yeah.
You know, why do they have a healthy baby and our baby is sick? You know, and cosmically, there's no answer for that.
No.
But those are the kinds of jealousies, you know, that break things apart. So.
But also, if we look at the hard facts, the economics of the situation also determines a lot of what is possible in some people's lives.
Yes.
We have here Henry and Beth, who are like the good couple. Everything is working out fine for them. They got lovely kids. They have a farm. Yeah. But the economy is really putting them under pressure.
Yeah.
Whereas you have Kip, who's making it in the big world as a broker,
right.
and there's Lee, who's making it as a rock star. But other problems comes with that. But economy does play a part in this.
Definitely, yeah, and I think that's part of it. I mean, look, it might be naive of me to say that like money doesn't matter at all in people's happiness. I think in some way money can make everything easier, but it can also have these, but it's not going to make an unhappy person happy, I don't think. I think it can make a happy person potentially happier, potentially unhappier,
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's just one of those kinds of jealousy that I was talking about, you know what I mean? And for a character like Leland, he's got everything. So of course what he's looking for is what he can't have.
Kip, who you said is sort of a villain when the book begins.
Yeah.
You know, he's selfish. He thinks about his own well-being and his own career, and he's even made a career out of sort of trading what the folks at home are bringing out with the sweat of their brows. He ends up paying a price for going for the money, but Lee also pays a price, and that price turns out to be fame. Fame is also something that is being discussed in the novel.
Yeah. Well, I don't really I mean, I think fame, I mean, first of all I'm trying to potentially talk about is fame in America. I don't know about how fame works in other countries, but I think fame in America right now is kind of a sickness. I don't really understand how, you know, and it's easy to take a pot shot at somebody like the Kardashians, but I don't understand that at all. It seems to me like in another time we would have rewarded being a good writer or a good painter or a great singer or being a philosopher or something, and now it's just being beautiful, which is potentially something you have really no control over. So I don't know, and
but why is this obsession with fame? Because it seems to be an obsession.
Yeah, I don't.
What's it about?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's obviously a industry. You know, I mean, you go to the grocery store and there's these magazines and they're shiny, so people want to buy them or something. I don't know. I don't really understand it at all. And it's fascinating because where we come from in the country, fame and success aren't a virtue. People don't drive nice cars where we live, even if they can afford them, because they would be embarrassed to.
Yeah.
So it's more perplexing to us, you know, I think.
So is that another reason why you can feel sort of left behind when you live out in the country?
Well, I'm not sure that I feel left behind. I think I feel like in some ways really, really fortunate that we have the lifestyle that we have, you know. When I think about literary careers that I'd be really fortunate to have, I think about somebody like Jim Harrison, who I'm not sure if he's really published in Denmark or not. But
I think he was, but it's like it's some.
He wrote. So he's a writer from northern Michigan, and I wouldn't say he's one of our most famous writers, but he's always been true to like where he came from in the world. He lived a really fun lifestyle. He enjoyed great food. I enjoyed great wine. Probably had a really complex marriage, I think. But he did exactly what he wanted to, and he did it away from the media hubs of our country. You know, he just was true to what he wanted to do. And that's kind of what I want to be like, you know. I feel like my publishing career so far has been so fortunate and so unexpected that like I'm really free to do whatever I want, you know.
They're not really girls throwing themselves at your feet screaming.
No.
Yet. It's gonna,
No. My wife is right there, so that'd be really, really awkward.
The marriage between Henry and Beth is described very they're a good couple.
Yeah.
It turns out there are some skeletons in the closet that starts to rattle along the way, but they are a good couple, one that you can identify with. How was it writing about them? Was there enough conflict in it, or was it just so much identification with your own marriage that it was easy?
Well, it's not first of all, it's not based on my marriage, but I think you know, like the beginning of when Harry met Sally, there's all these interviews with old couples, and they're talking about how they had a successful marriage. And I'm always interested when we go to weddings or something like that, how people have been married for 50 years. What's their secret? Because it's really hard to be married. It's not easy every day, you know? And I remember after the book got bought, they flew me to New York, and they were like really whining and dining me. This is my American publishers. And I was, one night they took me to this restaurant in Greenwich Village, and they had rented out a private room beneath the restaurant. And it was me and all the publishing bigwigs from this company. We were in a small, hot, dark room beneath the city, and the lights were really low, and I was totally out of sorts. But we all drank. We got really drunk right off the bat. And I was talking to one of the vice presidents of publishing, and I asked him if he was married and how long he'd been married, and he said like 45 years. And at the time I didn't know that he was dying of cancer. He was really close to dying. I didn't know that. And I said, well, what's your secret? You know, like, how have you done this? And he said, Nick, there's a lot of times where I just want to kill my wife. But I'm sure there's a lot of times where she wants to kill me. But it's all been worth it. You know, she's my best friend. We've been through everything together. And I thought, like, so there's that anecdote. And there's also, I had a teacher at Iowa who was the first black man to graduate from Harvard Law. He was the first black man to win a Pulitzer Prize. His name is James Allen McPherson. I don't know if anyone in this room has read his books. Has anyone? You know what the moral of that story is? You can win the Pulitzer Prize today, and 20 years later, nobody's read your books. And he had been divorced. He had an estranged child. And every time that he saw me in Iowa, he would say, how's your wife? How's your kid? And the reason why he said that is because books don't matter. Not really. You know, the amount of books that really endure over 150 years, like Moby Dick, there's about 10 of them or 20. The things that endure are your relationships with other people, what your children think about you, how many people come to your funeral, you know? So that's always been my attitude.
Yeah, but you're still a good writer.
Well, I don't know.
No, there's a lot of writers out there who crashes a lot of artists who crashes their personal life because they don't seem to be able to combine the two things, and it's almost like it's a kind of a fuel that has to be, this destruction has to be done in order for things to all go into the work, but I don't think that's really not necessary.
No, it's not necessary. And you said destructive. I mean, I don't want a destructive life. I want to live a long time. I love writing and publishing, and I feel like I live in a really beautiful life. Like everything is, I just told you, I get to walk out my back door and commune with the buffalo every night. Why would I want to screw that up? You know, and why would I ever want to take that for granted? So I don't. And I also live in a place where no one thinks I'm special, where I have 2 small kids who really don't care what I do, you know, like...
Daddy, why don't you get a real job?
Well, they're totally, I think they're like, my son was kind of asking me like what I do, and I was thinking about how he perceives my day-to-day, which is basically like me putting on a pair of sweatpants, making coffee, and working a Sudoku puzzle. Like that's what he thinks writing is. And then Dad gets on a plane and flies to Denmark, right? How is that possible? You know?
Maybe we should hear just a little more about what you actually do when you sit there and do the Sudokus.
I actually had somebody else write this for me, but so I guess this is like halfway through, and it's written from Leland's perspective. The reason they're called shotgun weddings is that the father of the bride is holding a shotgun to the groom's back. Something has happened, a pregnancy, a pop cherry, a bankruptcy, a war broke out. Whatever it was that happened, though, that wedding is going to happen and happen quick. No planning, probably straight away to the courthouse and maybe a nice reception, sans alcohol in the basement of the bride's church. No honeymoon, no aluminum cans dragging behind a limousine. That's how I thought about Shotgun Love Songs. It felt like I was holding a shotgun to my own back. I felt this pressure, this incredible pressure to do it, to finish, to prove to Little Wing, to Beth, to Kip, to Ronnie, to Henry, that I wasn't a failure, that I could do it. I could do something beautiful and different and noteworthy, and I could do it quick and dirty in an ancient chicken coop with just my shitty little personal computer and a wood stove to keep me from freezing to death. That album that cost me basically $600 to produce, it sold 1.6 million copies. It's still selling. It sells more every week than the week before that. And the love songs, they were all written for Beth.
Yes, and Beth is the wife of his best friend.
Right.
So we have some really, we have some strong confrontations and some very warm feelings brewing in the same part here.
Right.
I think maybe we should wish you a lot of luck with that.
Oh.
And I think maybe this is where we close, because I think we have talked about friendship, we have talked about music, and we have talked about the structure of the book, and we have definitely talked about a book worth reading.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming, and
Thanks for the question. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thank you. That was very nice.
You're gonna do some signing?
I think so, yeah.